Today on Trehane Paint the Game, we're going to forget about smooth blends as we paint up some Moonlight Ogre skin. Before we jump in, I'd like to show a close-up of one section of this mini that really shows the brush strokes and color separation that you can expect when you're done with this paint job. What we're aiming for is the overall artistic presentation of this miniature without worrying so much about how smoothly the colors transition. This miniature comes from the board game Massive Darkness, which plays on darkness and light, giving characters different abilities, whether they're standing in darkness or whether or not they're in the light. So what we're going to do to sort of play on that idea is we're going to paint half this miniature in shadow, and we're going to paint half the miniature as if it's well lit. I got the idea for the approach to painting this miniature from Squidmar Miniatures, who you should definitely check out if you're not already familiar with their channel. However, I'm not going to be using an airbrush at all for this paint job. I am strictly using handheld brushes. Starting with a black rattle can primed miniature, we are going to take Deep Blue by Army Painter, and we're going to cover half of the miniature in this dark blue color. And we're going to paint this miniature so it appears that the light is coming from the front and left side of the miniature. Therefore, we're going to cover the entire back and the right side of the face and extremities in this dark blue color. I also want to make sure that I paint the deep blue into all of the shadow areas on the front of the mini. It took me about 20 minutes and a couple coats of paint to get this miniature looking the way I wanted with this blue paint. And after I was all done with the miniature, I also applied a coat of this blue to the back half of the base. And that wraps up the blue, so we can start applying flesh tones to the front of the mini. Starting with Crusted Sore by Army Painter, we're going to apply this to all of the fleshy areas of the ogre, making sure that the Crusted Sore meets right up with the deep blue on the torso, face, and extremities. And we're going to do 2 to 3 coats of this to make sure everything is well covered. Next, we will make a 50-50 mix of the Crusted Sore and Deep Blue. We will thin it down a little bit with water, and then we are going to quickly do a little zigzag back and forth blend in between the Deep Blue and the Crusted Sore areas. We're not going to spend too much time on this. We're not going to worry about how quickly the color transitions from blue to red. We're just going to slightly blur the harsh line, and we're also going to add this as a shadow color in the deeper recesses of the area that we painted red. And now it's time to start highlighting the flesh with some basic skin tone. And I'll be honest, when I started doing this, I was freaking out a little bit. The contrast between this color and the Crusted Sore was a little starker than I anticipated, and I just thought there's no way I'm ever going to be able to blend these two colors together and make it look even halfway decent. But I decided to press on. My philosophy is, if something doesn't look good, just keep adding paint until it does. I'm coming to realize that smooth blends in tabletop miniatures or display pieces really isn't that important. I think if you're doing a piece for a competition where your technical skill is going to be judged as well as the artistic presentation, then those type of skills like smooth blending and such are extremely important. But for display pieces or pieces that are being handled on the table, I just don't think it's that important to the overall impact of the miniature. And maybe you disagree with that, but I'm sure if you search the internet hard enough, you can find an example or two of display level paint jobs that have high contrast between colors and don't focus on smooth blends. As we apply the basic skin tone, we're going to take it up right up to the top of each muscle group. We're going to take it to the top where it just meets the blue, leaving very little of the dark red in between the blue and the basic skin tone. And then on the lower parts of the muscles and belly, we're going to leave more of that red Crusted Sore showing, because that part's going to be in shadow, and so we want more of the darker red present there. Even as we get to the end of this process here, this piece is going to be looking pretty rough right now with that basic skin tone, and we are going to remedy that situation by using a 50-50 mix of basic skin tone and Crusted Sore to achieve a nice blend between those two colors. And because of the stark contrast between the Crusted Sore and the basic skin tone, I'm actually going to work this 50-50 mix pretty deep into the basic skin tone color as well as down to the Crusted Sore areas. And the skin should start looking a lot more natural as we work our way through this process, or at least as natural as ogre skin can look. Next, I'm going to take a 50-50 mix of Ice Yellow by Vallejo and the Basic Skin Tone by Vallejo, and I'm going to start highlighting the ogre. I'm going to focus on placing highlights mostly on the left side, the left half of the ogre, and I'm going to be applying these highlights to the upper areas of each muscle group, making sure to take them to the highest point on each muscle. I'm using a fairly thinned down paint consistency, and I'm going to be achieving this in multiple passes, covering less and less area with each pass. I am also highlighting the features on the left side of the face, as well as the right cheekbone, and any protrusions such as the knuckles on the left and right hands, as well as maybe a toe or two. You'll also notice that I did 2 separate bands of highlight on the left abdomen area, and that is just because the miniature looked like it needed it. I took the highlights pretty far during this step, eventually adding some dots of just pure ice yellow, especially around the lips, chin, and nose area. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in the painting process here because I want to wrap up this tutorial by showing you how to finish the moonlight effect on this miniature. So we're going to grab some dark stone and we're going to start blocking out some, you guessed it, stones on the front half of this miniature's base. We're not going to put any of these stones on the back half of the base where we applied that layer of dark blue paint. After getting all the stones blocked out with the dark stone, we're going to pick up some Uniform Gray by Army Painter and start to highlight all those stones on the base. And I'm just really picking out the front edge of each stone, sort of as it faces the front of the base. Then we're going to pick up some Ash Gray and do the same thing, but this time cover even less area. Ash Gray is also the color that we're going to use to start marking some indications of stones on the blue layer of paint on the back side of the miniature's base. We are not blocking out the entire shape of the stone as we did with the dark stone paint on the front. We're just going to outline the highlight of the stone. And this is where the magic happens. Take your favorite bottle of white ink and start dabbing out some highlights on the stones that are on the back side of the mini. When we're all done with that, we're going to go absolutely crazy adding highlights to the entire back of the mini. We're going to accomplish this by using short brush strokes that are applied perpendicular to the direction that the muscle is running. A good rule of thumb is to apply more highlights than you think you actually need. You can always go back and subdue them if you think you've overdone it. Your finished highlights should look something like this. We're going to quickly add some shadow colors around the stones on the front of the miniature's base using dark stone and ultramarine blue. The final part of this paint job is also the easiest. Returning to the deep blue that we started with, we're going to thin it down about 50-50 with water, and we're just going to cover all of the white highlights that we placed on the back side of the miniature and on the miniature's base. We're going to do a single coat of this, adding a second coat to the edges and undersides of each highlight if it needs to be darker. And this is how it should look when you're all done adding that moonlight glow with the deep blue. And now we're into overtime on this ogre skin. The ogre is looking a bit pale around the face, so we're going to take some red wash and use it as a glaze on the face area, focusing mostly around the nose, the lips and ears, as well as the vein on his left arm. And we're also going to take some of the red wash and apply a glaze to the knuckles on both hands. And that should liven up the skin color just a bit and wrap up the skin on this ogre. Thank you for watching this tutorial on how to paint Moonlit Ogre skin. Come back next time and we'll finish up his accessories and work on some non-metallic metal. Thanks for watching.